Hello, everyone. I'm here to report on some economic data that came out last week, last Friday in particular. And the data I'm going to report on is the employment numbers. So I've covered these numbers before. The first Friday of every month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports data on the employment situation in the United States. These are an incredibly important set of economic indicators, and they are important to both the public and private sector. In terms of financial markets, they are a big mover of financial markets. They could affect macroeconomic fiscal policy, monetary policy. They move interest rates. Very, very important. But what I want to do is make sure that you have an idea that this is not just one report. It's a bunch of indicators that come from two separate surveys. So if we go to the chalkboard here, you could think of uh, the employment report as an umbrella. So let's just draw a nice little umbrella. Okay. So this is basically the employment report. Now, on one side of the employment report is a survey that surveys employers. And that survey is sometimes called the Establishment Survey. CES is the technical acronym for it. And that is going to survey about over 300,000 employers. And it's going to ask them questions about how many people they hired, how many people they laid off, how many people they fired, that sort of thing. And some of the indicators that come from that report are the non-farm payroll employment. That's how many uh, how many jobs have been created on net in the United States. This is probably the most important number of the whole data. We're going to be looking at it. Another one you can get from this is average hourly earnings. I should have some more room right there. How about average weekly hours worked? That's another one. There are more. There are many more, but these are three of the big ones. On this side is called the household survey, and it comes from its acronym is the CPS. And that surveys employees. This surveys employers. This surveys employees, and about 60,000 employees are surveyed every month. Now you could tell that the sample size is much larger here than it is here. What are some of the indicators that come from this survey? Well, the unemployment rate is the most popular one. Another one would be labor force and the participation rate. These are some of the big ones that come from this report. So, very important data. It's basically greatly anticipated when they come out. So let's look at the data itself. So what I have here is some of the data that comes from FRED, Federal Reserve Economic Data, basically just takes the data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And you can see what we've got here is the payroll employment numbers. Now remember I told you that this is the data that shows how many jobs were created on net in the United States. And you could see the last data, let me get my little pen ready to go here. The last data right here is going to be, oh, hold on, try it again. This is for the month of August, and 235,000 jobs were created, 35K. Now that was created in 1 month on net. Now some jobs were lost, some jobs were gained, but on net, 235,000 jobs were created. Now that's not a bad number, but you have to put that number into context. And what's the context? The context is what were expectations for August? Expectations were for about 750,000. So this is what the market was expecting, and that's not what happened. So this was a bit of a disappointing month based upon how many jobs the market thought were going to be created. Now, as you can see that many more jobs were created in the previous month. This would be July and June. But you have to understand that these numbers were revised upward. Previously, this is about how many jobs were thought were created in July. But in reality, more jobs were created. So you've got there were over 1 million jobs created in July, basically 1,053,000, and in June about 962,000 right here. So big job numbers, and you can see that was accelerating. Now it was expected that the job creation would taper off to about 700K a month, but it fell a lot more. So the big question is, what's going to happen in September? Will September be higher? Will it be lower? Who knows? But to give you an idea of what happens in a typical month, what I want to do is I want to scroll down. I'm just doing a snapshot of basically May 2018 to January 2020. And the reason why I'm showing you this is these are what typically you see in a job. They range anywhere from about 300,000 right here to a slight net loss of about 50,000 jobs. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line here. I'm going to draw a line at about 150,000 jobs. That's going to be right about here. Now, why am I drawing this line here? Because this line represents about what the United States needs to create every month. It needs to create about 150,000 jobs per month in order to keep the unemployment rate steady. The reason being is there are a lot of people coming into the job market, either re-entrants, people who lost their job who are now coming back, or people who've never been in the labor market who are seeking their very first job, or people who left the job market and are coming back, let's say stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads who decide to get some work. The United States needs to create at least 150,000 jobs just to absorb the new entrants and the re-entrants into the labor force. So if the United States created less than 150,000 jobs like they did in May 2019, you could actually see the unemployment rate increase even though net jobs were created. So you can see here we had many months where we had above the 150,000 job minimum, and that's why you see these the unemployment rate fall. So here I've got the unemployment rate, which comes from the household survey. And you could see that after the Great Recession, this is what you see here. This is the recession started here and it ended here. But you can see the unemployment rate shot up. And it started to slowly fall over years, right? These are years taking it to fall. But then COVID hit, and you could see then it spiked to about 15%. And now it sharply has come back down. But look at the current rate. The current rate is, the unemployment rate is 5 point. I'm looking at my data here. 5.2. So this data is 5.2% right there. Now, that's still a lot higher. You got to go back to, right about here, about 2015, before the unemployment rate was equal to what it is right now. But you could tell it fell pretty low pre-COVID, and it was basically under 4%. So we still have some way to go to get to where we were, but we're getting there. Now, because the unemployment rate is falling, because economic activity is expanding, you would expect earnings, wages to go up. That's a simple case of supply and demand, right? Big demand for labor, lots of activity. You could expect the bidding war to commence in terms of labor. And we're kind of seeing that. So if we go to average hourly earnings, again, this comes from the establishment survey, the survey of employers. You could see that this is COVID right here, the economic activity contracting. That's that gray band. And you could see that prior to it, the average hourly earnings was kind of traveling between 3.5% and maybe 2.25%. It was fluctuating within this range. Then mid-COVID, we saw this huge spike in average hourly earnings. I can't really understand why that is, but that was an aberrant phenomenon because it came right back down. But now it was settling at around 5% growth on a year-over-year basis. That's pretty robust growth in average hourly earnings, which would be consistent with people hiring a lot of people. But then we had this big drop. Again, I can't explain why that is, but then it rebounded, and now it's trending this way. So the question is, do we have a new band that's going to be right around this area compared to this area? If this is the new growth in wages, that's good news for employees. Now, this could feed its way into inflation, and some people are expecting that, but that remains to be seen. Now, what I want to do now is take a look at another statistic that comes from the household survey, and that is average weeks of unemployment. So this is a great statistic. It tells you if you lose your job, on average, how long does it take you to get your job back? And you could see here, it was at a really low prior to the dot-com bubble bursting in late 2000. It took people on average, about 14 weeks to find their job once they lost it. That's very, very quick. That says something about the labor market at the time. Very tight. A tight labor market simply means it's tough to find workers. It's a seller's market, so to speak, in labor. And then we had the dot-com bubble burst. That's this gray area right here. And then you could see that the unemployment rate kept trending up. But it peaked, excuse me, not the unemployment rate. The weeks it takes to find work trended upward to about 20 weeks right here. 20 weeks. Then it started to slowly trend down, and then we had the financial crisis of 2008. And then it shot up, and this was very worrying. It took employees, on average, 40 weeks. How about I write that legibly? About 40 weeks to find work. And think about this, unemployment benefits at the time lasted 6 months. So you could easily see a lot of people used up all of their unemployment benefits. That's why Congress passed an emergency extension, because on average, people were out of work longer than 6 months. Then it started slowly trend down. And then COVID hit and it picked back up. But the good news is you could see that it's not going up anymore, and it's dropped a little bit in the last 2 months. Now, what I like to do is show people some more granular data from this statistic, which is in red. These are the number of unemployed for less than 5 weeks. So this is the number of workers who've been unemployed for less than 5 weeks, and the number of workers who've been unemployed for more than 27 weeks. Now, what you want in a great job market, you want the blue line to be less than the red line. And that's what you see prior to the dot-com bubble right here. You could see that most workers found jobs in less than 5 weeks, while a minority of workers, it took more than 27 weeks. And then what you saw in the financial crisis, you finally saw in this point where they cross. And now the long-term unemployed outnumbered the people who were unemployed for a short period of time. Now, it took time, and this number slowly came down, and finally, around late 2015, the short-term unemployed outnumbered the long-term unemployed. But you could see what happened right after COVID. We had that crossing of the Rubicon, so to speak, and now the long-term unemployed is greater than the short-term unemployed. Now, hopefully this is going to cross each other again, and I would expect that to be the case. But right now, all of this data is pointing to, well, right now it's kind of mixed because nobody expected such weak job numbers. 235,000 jobs was not what the market expected. So this could be good news in terms of inflation, because if the job market stops tightening and it starts treading water, so to speak, you could expect that is going to release some pressure on inflation from labor costs going up. That remains to be seen. But hopefully this has put the job numbers in perspective. Okay, that's all for now.